Hi, I'm Margaret and welcome to Garden School. Today I wanted to talk a little about biennials. What are biennials? What makes them a biennial? And perhaps we'll even take a look at some of the Today I wanted to talk a little about biennials. What are biennials? What makes them a biennial? And perhaps we'll even take a look at some of the common plants we might see in our garden, in our vegetable garden even, and talk about them as biennials. Well, here, this yellow flowering plant, this happens to be kale that was left in the garden over winter. You can see the leaves that are representative of kale. But you see this tall, long stem with beautiful little yellow flowers at the top that will eventually, if pollinated, develop into seeds. This is a biennial, which means that the first year we would typically see the leaves that we know of as kale and eat as kale. And then the second year, they are stimulated to produce flowers and seed and conclude their life cycle. Okay, so here is a parsley plant. We recognize the curly leaves down below. But what is this? Well, that is the flower stalk. There are the beginnings of the blooms, and then there will be seeds. This is a second-year plant. It grew small in my gravel pathway last year. It didn't bother anybody. Now, it seems to catch the hose on it every single time I pass by with the hose. That's okay. I'll harvest some of those greens, and then we'll move on. Now, if I leave this here to produce seeds, guess what's going to happen next year? I'll have a whole lot of parsley growing in the gravel. Well, we'll see what we can do about that. Here's another one, Honesty or Lunaria, the silver dollar plant. So this plant parent dropped seeds here 2 years ago, and then last year it was a small little plant. And then this year, we're going to see the blossoms and then the seeds. Here's another one, Forget-me-not. This is the second year plant. And then see these little guys here? If I don't pull those out, they will be the beautiful blue flowers for me next year. Now, I can thin as I want to, and there probably are still seeds in the soil here. But it's just something to think about. If I clean this totally up, I will have way less forget-me-nots. Now, maybe that's something I want, or maybe I kind of like these lovely blue things. But there's a reason they call it forget-me-not. Another, Digitalis, the common foxglove. These guys produce lots and lots of seeds. And I actually happen to have an alternate variety, the white blooming one, which I think is really cool. And something I've noticed is that some years I have more white, and then some years the purple is the predominant. Probably has to do with which plants produced seeds, and then there might be an off year, for instance, for the white, in which the purple is predominant in my yard. Now, also, this is another one that if you see the little seedlings here and there, keep in mind that next year, that will be the flowering plant. So here are a whole bunch of little first-year foxglove plants. So these are little seedlings from the seeds of the blooming foxglove plant that was nearby here. And you know, this right over here is probably the remnants of that plant from last year. Now, these will continue to form a nice little rosette low to the ground for this season. And then next year, we will see the elongation of the flowering stem and then the flowers, and it will set seed next year, and that'll complete its life cycle. Well, one of the really cool things about biennials is that they tend to produce lots of seeds. Now, maybe that isn't such a cool thing. If you're in a place where you really don't want to have a plethora of little seedlings coming up next year, then as soon as, for instance, the foxglove blossoms are done and the seeds start to set, just take that off. Otherwise, you can leave them, and then it's your job to clean them up, though. Next spring, when you have so many little first-year plants. It's just something great, though, to think about. Well, the reason they're called biennials is because it takes 2 years for the plant to complete its life cycle. Biennial. So the first year it's just going to be vegetative and build up food storage. The second year it sends up that flowering spike, flowers, sets seed, and then distributes seed, and then the life cycle of that plant is over. That's why it's called a biennial. A lot of our vegetables are actual biennials. For instance, carrots and celery, if you leave those in the garden over winter, the next year they will send up a flowering spike and set seed. Now when that starts to happen, we call that bolting. The quality of the vegetable that you're desiring, whether it's the leaves or the root, really goes down. It becomes woody or super strong in taste. That's kind of what happens with the kale plants. Now sometimes this will happen in the middle of one season, and that can happen because of drought stress or maybe a heat spike or something. So the plant is kind of shocked into what would be its normal second year of growth to produce flowers and seeds. There is a process called vernalization, and that means there's a cold period the plant needs to experience before it will naturally then in its own cycle send up the flowering spike and set seed. And for us, that typically happens during the winter. So if you leave your kale in the garden all winter, or your carrots in the garden all winter, you will see in the spring, after it's had a cold vernalization period, that flower spike, the seed spike comes up. Well, if you're into collecting seeds, that could be really fun. Well, have fun with this. Learn and to identify some biennials. I hope you have some around you. There's always more to learn in the garden. Bye-bye.